COVID-19 has robbed millions of lives, those including student athletes. Although some schools have decided to allow back a few teams, not all 480,000 collegiate athletes will have an opportunity to have a season during this pandemic.
My name is Kayla Clark.
So hi, I'm Alexis Williams.
I'm a senior sociology major, English minor from Miami, Florida.
I'm a senior at the George Washington University. I'm a political science major, double minor in criminal justice and public policy.
And I'm a part of the women's track and field team.
And I'm also on the women's soccer team.
So I am Abby Coffey.
I am Dr. Jessica Desalu.
I am a graduate student at UNC Charlotte. I did my undergrad at Charlotte. I also played soccer at Charlotte.
And I am one of the clinical psychologists over at the Howard University Counseling Services.
With education looking a bit different this fall semester, collegiate student athletes have found themselves from playing on the field and being in the classroom with their peers to being stuck in their room in front of the computer screens. How are you balancing these new workouts with your online class schedule?
Definitely had to really tighten up on my time management. I use both a handheld planner for assignments and stuff, but I've also started implementing like the Google Calendar so I can literally plan out my day.
With my time, I kind of like find it difficult to find a time to work out and run. And like, I'm also just extremely tired after being on the computer all day and stuff like that.
So just being mindful of like what I having to do and giving myself grace. Because like, you know, it's not as structured as it is when we were at Howard.
So I think that like, say if I were at school or something, it would be a lot easier to work out because it's mandatory and I'm forced to do it, rather than since I'm at home, it's not.
So just making sure I at least do 30 minutes of something every day.
Overall, I would say it's a lot more challenging to find times to work out, just not being forced, not being mandatory, and just with my workload of school and stuff.
Student athletes have adjusted their typical 20 hours a week team practices, which is a rule that was put into place by the NCAA, to now practicing in a virtual and primarily independent space.
I think working out has become less of I have to do this because of track and more of a like this is my kind of like self-care. When I'm stressed out or like mentally I'm in a bad headspace, I tend to lack on my workouts. I work out by myself, which has I've done that before, but it is different. I'm so used to working out with teammates and having like, you know, people to push you. So it is like, sometimes you can definitely feel that difference. At one point I was doing like the Zoom classes online with a trainer at home, which is really cool. Like just, you know, making that virtual setting still feel very inclusive. So I think I've done a little bit of everything. I think it definitely has more of a positive effect on my mental health than anything else.
So how do you personally keep your teammates motivated?
We as a team, we do like accountability groups. So like one off campus, one on campus, and then someone at home. Like that's what the group is made up of. So it's like you get to talk to different people that you wouldn't normally talk to, and we kind of just check in.
Prior to the pandemic, the NCAA has reported that student athletes spend on average nearly 40 hours per week on academics. Due to schools going completely virtual, naturally the screen times have increased, which can lead to many health issues such as eye strain, headaches, insomnia, poor sleep, dry eyes, overexposure of blue light, neck, shoulder, and back pain, and more.
I try to make sure I at least get some type of sunlight a day or go for a drive, because it is like even now I went from like doing classes in my room to coming to the kitchen table because I just need a change of environment and like making sure that I make time for me, whether that's like going outside to read a book, going to work out, going to get some ice cream, just like keeping myself sane, because the screen time is a lot. Like it's very overbearing at times. If I've been doing work all day, this is it. This is the cutoff. I'll finish the rest tomorrow. Let me watch Netflix for the night.
Just being an athlete for like however long, I can't sit for too long and not work out. Like I just get antsy. And also personally, like I would like to stay in shape and I like to work out. So it'd be more of a personal motivation. However, I've been trying to incorporate soccer whenever I can, just because like at this point, it seems like we're going to have like a season in the spring, I guess. And I don't want, as everybody else is, or a good amount of people are on campus and practicing, I don't want to be far too behind them. Being it my last year, I don't want to, struggle when I come back in preseason or whatever our preseason is going to be. So I definitely find motivation, like personally, and through just wanting to like put my best foot forward since it's my last year.
And definitely wanting to highlight some specific populations. So for example, thinking about seniors at large, right? Potentially was their last year to play, at least at the collegiate level, their sport of interest. This was their last year to kind of have the same camaraderie with their players on their team, and not having that anymore. And also thinking about the first year in college students, right? They've worked so hard up until this point, gone through the whole college acceptance. They've already had a hard time. They already lost, a good portion of their high school senior year. And then to start college and not have essentially what they came for. For a lot of students, they choose a university based off of their sport of interest. That can be a little bit depressing. And it can also be anxiety provoking, just not knowing how things are going to progress. And it can also be lonely because you're not able to engage with the other players on your team in a way that you would have before. So for student athletes, they have essentially lost a critical component of their identity, unfortunately.
Back in 2013, from January 16th to 19th, the NCAA held their annual convention where they had been addressed by the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, SAC, about their concerns surrounding the mental health of student athletes on college campuses. By mid-November of 2013, about 24 scientists, clinicians, policy experts, team physicians, administrators, coaches, and student athletes had formulated what is now known as the NCAA Mental Health Task Force. Now the NCAA has worked hand in hand with SAC members across various collegiate athletic conferences to make sure that the mental health of student athletes during this pandemic is being recognized at the conference and university level.
I know one program we really had last when we were on campus was actually having like a mental health discussion with the athletes, and we literally just sat down, and it was more of a venting session. We had everything planned out, but I think, it was in that kind of setting, everyone realized like, oh my gosh, like we're literally robots. Like we're taught to like push without rest. And I think that was a very pivotal event in just how we tackle mental health, both on the Howard's level and through the MEAC. So I know like we've had mental check-in when we got sent home at COVID. We've had the girls talk, the boys talk. So really truly standing on our word when we say like we care about mental health, like we literally do.
How do you think this pandemic has affected the mental health as well as the identity of student athletes currently?
I think that the pandemic has really done a lot of isolation for people. Isolation can be a breeding ground for torment and just distress and despair, feeling hopeless, uncertain, very anxious about how the pandemic is going to progress, when things will get back to normal, accepting that things may never actually be in the way that they were before. And so I think that it has had a significant impact on just our overall well-being. And so I think that what's unique for student athletes is that they have unfortunately missed out on a significant portion of their identity. They're a student athlete. And so because of the pandemic, they haven't really been able to live up to the athlete component of their identity. And with that comes a grieving process, right? Because folks aren't playing sports in the way that they were before. And there's a lot of uncertainty about when and if they will. And so if this has been something that has been critical to your being for a long time, again, it's a significant loss to not be able to do it and to not know when or if you're going to be able to do it again.
When you are a student athlete, and especially the higher levels that you play at, it just becomes who you are. When you play a sport from the time that you're 5 years old, by the time you get to 22, you're a senior in college. No matter where you are, D1, D2, D3, being an athlete is going to be a part of your identity. I think that that identity piece has been the biggest struggle for athletes in this time. And when sports were taken away from them, they lost who they were.
Definitely. I hate to say it, I'm a retired athlete. Like, if we work have a season, like, I'm gonna do what I have to do. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not to the point where it's like if I have to go back and start lifting, I'm gonna die. Like, that first week gonna be hard. But like, I don't know. I think I'm a realist. Like, I have to just come to terms with the reality that I don't know. And I guess because I'm still doing stuff with the MEAC and still doing stuff with SAC, it's not as like, such an abrupt ending, because it's like, okay, I may not be as active in the physical realm, I guess, in regards to, actually competing, but I'm still able to do meaningful things within athletics.
Outside of the NCAA, a graduate student at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, is curating a study on the mental health of collegiate athletes. Abby Coffey plans to take her research and apply it to a storyline podcast series that will be accessible to all student athletes to listen to.
I really had this idea where I wanted to make a difference with student athletes. My own story, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but out of that, really just had this idea of wanting to help student athletes. And so at the time I was just in my undergrad, and I felt kind of powerless to make any kind of change. I thought I was too young, or I was too unexperienced, or fill in the blank, too whatever. But went to one of my professors and said, hey, I have this idea. I don't know what to do. What's my next step? And instead of telling me my next step, she said, can I work on this project with you? That happened in fall of 2018. Since then, we've been working on the project, and it's been really cool to see how it's developed.
Coffey started her Take a Time Out study primarily after learning how to cope with her own mental health during her undergraduate years. The podcast will introduce different characters who go through different mental health experiences and teach the listeners different coping mechanisms to apply in their day-to-day life.
So one of the biggest benefits of being funded under the NCAA Innovations in Practice grant is that when we're done testing, when we're done creating it, when we are done developing and we've tested the whole thing, it becomes available then to every NCAA school in the country. Division I, Division II, Division III, big school, small school, liberal arts school, Power 5, HBCU, it's available to, so there's a little over 11,000 NCAA schools in the country, and every single one of those will have access for free. It's really amazing to think, over 400,000 student athletes could have access to this program by this time next year.
What made you interested in mental health of student athletes?
Because so much of what an athlete does on a day-to-day basis is not just their physical strength, but it's also their mental strength. So there was a time in my athletic career where I was not mentally strong. I was struggling with an eating disorder, struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety. It ended up putting me in the hospital. I was, a high-functioning, high-performing student athlete, and I just was not okay. But for years, I struggled in silence because I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be big student athlete. People would know me on campus, or people would ask me, well, do you play soccer? And so you're feeding into that persona. So many student athletes just feed into that persona, and they struggle in silence. A lot of the initiatives in the NCAA and in conferences are not about tangible products or tangible programs. They're about opening up a conversation, which is amazing, but there really was a need for a resource to be developed that student athletes could access.
How do you foresee the mental health of student athletes into the spring semester and in the future, with the possibility of us still being in a pandemic?
And my hope is that student athletes will be able to be more resilient, especially after, we've been in a pandemic 9 months now. It's my hope that student athletes have used this time to, yes, grieve for sure, because that is important, but then also have used this time to kind of accept that this is the unfortunate reality, and their engagement in their sports, especially if you are, a first year, sophomore, junior, yes, it is going to be delayed, but it's not going to be denied completely. And so my hope is that student athletes will be able to kind of hold on to that. Hopefully this is another time too to kind of explore other aspects of one's identity. I don't want to minimize how important it is for folks to identify as an athlete, but hopefully folks are also able to use this time to think about, what are some other critical components of myself? What are some other critical components of my identity?
How your identity as an athlete ties to your mental health has been such an important thing. I'm very big on the idea, like, we're more than an athlete. So showing people that just because you're not competing like you want to doesn't mean you're a failure, or it doesn't mean you're not good enough. You're very multifaceted in a sense. We're all very multifaceted in a sense.